Deputy Cairns.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all so much for your statements and for being here today. I suppose given all of the harrowing information we have from representative organisations like what we've heard here today, the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland's report, various media reports in relation to workers' conditions in the industry, and that before this the industry was most recently associated with farmers' protests because they can't get a fair price for their work and produce. Given all of that and more, I suppose there's serious questions raised around how the industry treats people, workers and farmers and consumers, because I think we all deserve transparency and to know that our food, the food that we consume, is produced in a fair and ethical way. I can't imagine that many consumers feel inspired to buy produce that has come from these conditions at the moment. So for all of those reasons, I've been calling for a task force to examine conditions for workers. And Mr. Ennis, you mentioned that you've been asking for one from the Department of Agriculture too. I'm wondering if you would all support the establishment of a task force to examine this industry and what specifically you would like examined in relation to workers' conditions. And I have one more question after that.
Yeah, Deputy Cairns, as I said, I wrote to the Minister on this back in April. It seems a long time ago now, or mid-May in fact, on this. And indeed, we've handed over this week our SIP2 charter to the Meat Industry Ireland with regard to the purpose of which was obviously safety of workers, their families and the wider community, the continuity of production, because we do need a meat processing business, it's an essential foodstuff, but more importantly also the terms and conditions reflecting that essentiality of the sector. So, you know, we put in preventative and corrective measures within that protocol and that charter. So, yeah, I believe we absolutely need to look at it. We need to look at it from every angle. We need all of the stakeholders, as I said earlier, but we definitely need to look at the terms and conditions of workers within that industry. It's not good enough to cheerlead, as I said, and call it an essential service and pay people a pittance for very labour-intensive, sometimes very challenging work in meat plants. And I think, you know, this has shone a light on the meat industry, and when a crack opens up, the light comes in, and this has been the crack in the meat industry, and it's about time that this industry was put under the microscope. There's nothing wrong with an employer or employers making profits. Once those profits are generated through workers on reasonable terms and conditions, that is the trade-off, and at the moment that's not happened. So yes, I would welcome it, and I would love if this committee recommended that we have this task force, and there must be a workers' voice on it, like there is all over Europe.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been calling for it in this committee, and I've written to the Chair about establishing that. Just briefly from the other two organisations, because I have one more question, would you support the establishment of a task force to look into workers' rights in this sector?
Yes, so we would definitely support it, but we would also have the demand of union representatives being allowed to carry out work inspections in unionized workplaces, because this has been a demand of trade unions in Ireland for a long time. In other European countries, this happens, and this would be of great benefit to workers if their own representatives who are on their side would be able to also be present in inspections and see what's happening. And we would also like this task force to maybe address the fact that people who are housed by their employment agencies do not have the same rights as normal tenants, that they have contracts that allow, scam contracts that allow them to be evicted with no notice and shifted around houses from one to the other. So this could easily be sort of discovered in an inspection. We would also want agency employment to be better regulated in Ireland, because from what we see, and in hundreds, maybe thousands of cases, agency workers always have worse conditions than those who are directly employed, even though this is clearly illegal and could be discovered in a routine inspection. And also, we would want to make sure that all workers who work in meat plants in Ireland are actually declared in Ireland, so that their PRSI contributions are paid and that they have access to social security. So this would be, I'd say, the priorities for this task force, but I would really like to insist how a union presence in these inspections would really strengthen workers' rights and their bargaining power with their employers.
Thank you. Just one quick question. I'm just wondering, I have to ask, why did it take COVID and workers to become infected to bring all this out? And I'm wondering if the unions were aware of conditions in meat plants before this.
Well, I'll maybe take that. And Deputy, thank you for that question. And there are a number of reasons for it. Firstly, affiliate unions of Congress, but particularly SIP2, have represented workers in meat plants for decades. That's number one. But in some cases you will have a collective agreement and the terms and conditions, but it's not the norm and it's not by any means the majority. So we have argued strongly. For instance, I sit on the Low Pay Commission. I've taken part in the public consultations where we've had exposure to workers coming in just from the street and offering in the public consultation their view as to what's happening in their environment and in meat factories as well. So we would be well aware, but there is a very large body of opposition to having workers having any voice. And there is a reason for that. Because if you have a production pace at the level that they have, that's where the focus of those employers is. And that production pace, I mean, if you look at the top 10 companies operating in this sector, you're talking about the top one having a turnover of 2.3 billion in 2019. And the second one, 2.2 billion. So you're talking about big money to be made. And their focus is on keeping those production lines as fast and as lean as they can. And that means people, the model is working people as hard as they can for as little as they can for as long as they can. That is the model. That's the model and they're going to resist any infiltration by us in to have discussions, and then they're backed up by a law or by the lack of legislation in this country which says actually if those workers want to have their voice heard collectively, there's no law that says they can do that. So the balance of power here lies with the employers, and it's not a question that we haven't been saying it. We're blue in the face saying it. I'm 3 decades doing this and for a living, and I can tell you we're blue in the face, but we still haven't succeeded in getting it across the value of having a balance in terms of this employer-worker relationship. And that's what we're seeing. It takes a pandemic to demonstrate the fallout of this, but it has been around for a long time.
So just for clarity,
going to have to...
The clarity is that the unions were aware of workers' rights and workers' conditions before this pandemic, but the power of the beef lobby was too big to make those voices heard. And
they don't listen, is the answer. They don't listen.
Thanks, Ms King. Thank you. And thank you, Deputy Cairns. Thank you.